The police lights painted my porch in red and blue, and the cold June wind carried the smell of lake water and cut grass. Two officers stood at the bottom of my steps with hands near their belts. Behind them, a shiny white SUV idled. In the driver's seat sat Linda, the HOA lady, who didn't actually have an HOA, over my house, chin up, lips tight, cell phone raised like it was a badge. Ranger, my canine, leaned against my right leg and watched them without a sound. He didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He just watched the way a storm watches a field. "Sir," the taller officer said, "we've had multiple calls that you're refusing to comply with your homeowners association. They say you're threatening neighbors and ignoring fines. We need you to come down and talk." I had my rifle slung across my chest, muzzle down, sling snug against my shoulder, safety on my front porch, on my land. It was legal. I wasn't waving it around. I just come back from coyote patrol near the chickens and hadn't even taken it off yet. "Officers," I said, calm as I could, "there's no HOA here that I'm part of. That woman's been trying to force me to join. I'm not going anywhere. We can talk right here." The shorter officer cut a glance at the rifle, then at Ranger. "Is the dog trained?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Ranger's a retired K-9 from Fort Bliss. He's 12. He's steady." Ranger sat almost like he understood the word. Steady means peace. Linda's window rolled down with a squeal. "Officers, arrest him. He's brandishing, and that dog is dangerous. He threatened me. We're enforcing compliance. This is a covenant neighborhood." She stretched the word covenant like a rubber band. The taller cop sighed. "Ma'am, please stay in your vehicle." A second cruiser pulled up. The night got busier. Neighbors peeked from porches, porch lights popping on like stars. A kid's bike lay on its side on the sidewalk. The lake behind our street was just a black mirror. Then a third set of lights swept over the trees, gold and green, not red and blue. The county sheriff's Tahoe eased in and parked at an angle. Sheriff Collins stepped out, hat low, jaw set, the way folks get when they have the whole rule book memorized. He looked at the cops. He looked at me. He looked at Linda. "Evening," he said. "What's going on, Sheriff?" Linda snapped before anyone else could speak. "This man refuses to join our HOA. He keeps that animal out and scares children. He breaks every guideline. He can't park his truck there. He can't keep chickens. He can't fly that flag. He can't have that rifle in the open. Fix this." Sheriff Collins looked at my porch flag, U.S. flag, a gold star service banner for my brother, and a small blue star for RER's K-9 service. He looked at RER's gray muzzle. He looked at my sling. "David Carter," he said to me. "We talked once at the grocery store. How's the coop?" "Chickens are happy," I said. He nodded slow. Then he turned to the officers. "We're on his porch. Lawful carry. No threats, no brandishing." He turned to Linda, voice steady. "Ma'am, he doesn't belong to your HOA. We've covered this twice. The platted lots stop at Birch Lane. His deed says no covenants." Linda's jaw clicked. "We voted to include his street. The vote doesn't change recorded deeds." The sheriff said, "Not in this county, not in this state." Linda's face flushed red in the SUV's interior light. "Then cite him for intimidation with that weapon." The sheriff moved his eyes to me. "Sharp, careful, David. I need you to keep that sling tight and your hands visible. All right." "Yes, sir," I said. "Good." He clicked his radio once, then again, then paused like he was weighing something big. He looked toward Linda's SUV, and the glass on the passenger side caught the light just right. There, tucked on the seat, was a white folder stuffed with papers. The top page showed a red stamp in big block letters, Lion. Sheriff Collins's mouth went thin. He lifted his radio to his lips, and then he said, "Dispatch." Starter radio squawked, and his eyes cut to Linda like he'd just noticed a snake under a chair. "Hold that. I need to look at something first." He stepped toward Linda's window. That's when Ranger stood, every hair along his back lifting, and stared past the sheriff into the dark space between my fence and the lilac bushes, the one spot no porch light reached. He didn't bark. He just stared. Something was moving in the dark. I took one step sideways to put myself between the officers and that shadow and said, "Ranger, heel." He didn't heel. The sheriff turned, saw where Ranger was watching, and put his hand out like a stop sign. "Nobody moves," he said. His voice was flat and hard, and in that black space I heard the soft clink of wire cutters. The night held its breath. Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. That's where I'll leave you for a second. Because nights like that, where law and fear and pride meet in the same front yard, don't start at the top of the hill. They roll there over time. So let me tell you how we got to the moment when my faithful dog stared into a dark gap that held a secret big enough to pull the sheriff's finger away from his radio. It began with a soft thing, not a hard one. A handwritten note on my welcome mat the week I moved in. "Welcome to Willow Lake," it said in curly letters. HOA meeting Thursday at 6. Dues $150 month. Attendance mandatory. Linda. I flipped the card over, expecting a phone number, a website, a letterhead, something official. There was nothing, just the faint smell of a lemon candle. The next morning, I took Ranger for a walk down Birch Lane, past half-built houses and old maples that looked like they'd been here since the first fishing shack. It was early summer, school out, sprinklers making rainbows across lawns. A man in denim overalls, Mr. Walker, waved from his porch. He had a white beard and a mug that said "World's Okayest Grandpa." "You the new one?" he called. "Yes, sir," I said. "Mike, this is Ranger." "Fine dog," he said. "You get the Linda letter?" I blinked. "I think so." He chuckled without humor. "There's no active HOA for this street. She's trying to resurrect one from the other side. Don't sign anything." I nodded, filed that away, and went home. That afternoon, I fixed the back fence. The lake wind had worked one of the corner posts loose. Ranger lay in the shade and watched ducks make V's across the water. I thought about the last base I'd lived near, about sand and heat, and the way a dog's heartbeat feels against your palm. You don't come back from that kind of life without wanting quiet. That's why I bought here. The deed had said it clear as sunlight. No covenants, no association. I liked those words. 2 days later, I got an email. The subject line read, "Immediate action required." The message came from Willow Lake Compliance. There was an attachment titled "Rules and Fines." The body of the email said, "All residents must join Willow Lake HOA effective immediately. Late fees will be assessed. Your first payment is due Friday. Failure to comply will result in lien towing and referral to legal." I replied polite. "I don't belong to any HOA. Please stop contacting me. I attached a PDF of my deed." No answer. Friday came with a knock. 3 knocks. Fast, fast, fast. I opened the door and met Linda in person for the first time. She was middle height with a neat bob haircut, a white blouse without a wrinkle, and a lanyard with a plastic card that said "Board President." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "David, right," she said. "Welcome. I'll take the dues now. Cash, check, or card?" "Card has a small convenience fee." "I'm not in your HOA," I said. She looked past me like she was inspecting my hallway for dirt. Everybody in Willow Lake participates or they face fines. Standards matter. "I'm not refusing standards," I said. "I mow my grass. I keep things tidy, but I won't sign a contract I never agreed to." She tilted her head. "So, you're difficult." She held up a printed fine schedule. "Here's what happens next. First day warning. Second day, $50. Third day, $100. Fourth day, lien." She tapped the paper like it was a drumbeat. "We're organized. This is a community." I took a breath. I'm all for community. "Tell you what, how about a real community thing? Next week, I'll repair Mr. Walker's front steps. They wobble. I'll do it for free." She blinked like I'd spoken a foreign language. "That's not how this works," she said. "We have rules. Kindness is a rule where I'm from," I said. Her smile turned brittle. "We'll be in touch." They were. Letters came, then emails, then a bright orange sticker on my mailbox that said "Non-compliant." That last one burned a little. Mailboxes belong to the federal government, not HOAs that aren't yours. I peeled it off and threw it away, but I didn't spit nails. Instead, I fixed Mr. Walker's steps. I brought groceries to the widow on the corner when her son was sick. I built a little free library box and put it next to my driveway with a sign that said, "Take a book, leave a book." I waved at kids on bikes and helped a teenage girl jump her car when her battery died. Ranger learned the pattern of the street, who belonged and who didn't, and he wagged his tail at the mailman every day at 10:15. For a while, it felt like the good would drown the bad. Then one afternoon, I came home to find a tow truck backed up to my driveway, chains clinking, the driver trying to hook my old blue pickup. It wasn't fancy. It was 15 years old and had more miles than sense, but it ran like a promise. Linda stood nearby with a clipboard. "Hey," I said, jogging up, "what's this street parking restriction?" She said, "Your truck violates section 4.2. "My driveway isn't a street," I said. She sniffed. "The view corridor is part of the aesthetic. This is a lakeside community, not a junkyard. The tow driver looked at his paperwork and then at me. You got any proof you're not in the HOA? He asked, voice quiet. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had kids to feed and didn't love this. I pulled out the deed again. He read it, then handed it back like it was a hot skillet. Ma'am, he said to Linda, I'm not touching his truck. Linda's jaw hopped again. You'll never work here again. She hissed. The driver shrugged. Then I won't. He left. I went inside and made a sandwich and tried to laugh, but laughter felt like trying to breathe through a wool blanket. That night, I found a note pinned to my fence with a thumbtack. Join or else, it said. No signature. I could have gotten angrier. Instead, I got practical. I called the county, checked my lines, printed out the plat maps, and stuck them in a folder by the door. I put a small solar light by the chicken run. I added a camera to the front porch, not to pick a fight, just to hold light to darkness. 2 mornings later at 6:30 a.m., a patrol car coasted to a stop in front of my house. Officer Harris stepped out. Short, steady, hair pulled into a neat bun. We had a call, she said, almost apologetic, complained about a dangerous dog. I looked at Ranger, who was asleep on the rug, snoring like a tiny motorboat. That one? She smiled. I'm guessing not. She wrote a short note on her pad, then put her pen away. Sorry to bother you. It's okay, I said. Want a donut? I've got a box from Henderson's. Her smile widened. I shouldn't. Shouldn't is not can't, I said. She laughed and took one. That morning tasted like cinnamon and truce. For 3 days after that, the air felt clear. But people like Linda don't stop when they think they're right and the world is out of step. They push harder. They call friends. They call cousins. They make their own paper look like a judge stamped it. Which brings us back to the night of lights and quiet and rangers staring into the gap by the lilac bush while the sheriff thought about the word lean on a piece of paper that had no power over my land. I heard the metal clink again. Ranger took one step down from the porch, slow, like he was spelling his name with his paws. The officers tensed. The sheriff said, David, call your dog. Ranger back. I said. Ranger didn't move. His ears were pointed at that black slice. His body a low line of muscle and memory. The fence there had fresh marks on it. Day-old scuffs like someone had tested it earlier. Linda from her SUV shouted, That animal is out of control. Ma'am, the sheriff said without looking at her. Not another word. I swallowed. The wind lifted the edge of the flag just once like a nod. Whoever's in my bushes, I called, keeping my voice even. You're on private land. Come out slow, hands up, and this stays simple. Silence, then a whisper. Feet sliding on dirt and the tiniest flash of a phone screen trying to light a path and failing. The sheriff tilted his head. Grant, he said to the taller officer, you've got the back gate, Harris, with me. His hand went to his radio again. Dispatch, start of Hildars. And right then, before he could finish, something heavy thumped against the inside of my fence. The gate latch rattled like teeth in a glass. A low growl rose out of Ranger, deep and steady, the kind that says, I don't want to bite you, but I will do my job. The latch lifted. The gate jerked. The sheriff shouted, hands where I can see them. The gate began to swing open. Ranger launched. He didn't bite. He didn't even bark. He moved like a streak of shadow and stopped in the gap, body crosswise, head high, teeth closed, eyes bright. A man's breath hitched behind the gate. The smell of sweat and cheap cologne slid through the night. I stepped forward, keeping the rifle pointed at the ground, and felt a sheet of cold run down my back. There, faint in the gate's shadow, I saw a reflective vest with the words, Cho Security in block letters. It wasn't real law. It was a costume someone had bought online. Step out, the sheriff said again, hands high. The man in the vest took a half step, froze, then took another. His hands rose, shaking. A phone tumbled from his pocket and clacked against the stones. Beyond him, I could see another shape, smaller, slipping away along the fence line toward Linda's idling SUV. Harris saw it too. We've got two, she said. One headed toward the street. Copy, the sheriff said. Grant. On it, Grant answered, jogging toward the back. Linda's voice pitched high. Those are my contractors. They're here to measure violations. The sheriff turned his head just enough to let his eyes land on her. Measuring with wire cutters? He asked. No answer. He faced the man in the vest again. Name? The man swallowed. Mark? He muttered. Last name? A tiny pause. Browning, he said, as in the same last name as Linda's mail merge threats. The sheriff's jaw flexed. He looked at me. He looked at Ranger. He looked at the folder on Linda's passenger seat with the big red lion stamp. He lifted his radio to his mouth one more time. Dispatch. Start a unit to Willow Lake Birch Lane. Possible trespass and attempted criminal mischief, and run the plate on a white HOA. He stopped, corrected himself on a white SUV, Texas tag. Linda's hand shot toward her gear shift. The sheriff's voice went iron. Ma'am, put the vehicle in park. Put your hands on the steering wheel. Do not move. Her chin lifted in that small, proud way some people have when they think rules are for other folks. You can't tell me. Rears's gaze never left the man in the gate. The knight exhaled, and then the neighbor kid's bike, forgotten all this time, began to roll slowly down the sidewalk because the wind had finally found it, and its tiny front wheel bumped the cruiser's tire and fell with a clatter that sounded in the tense dark like a gunshot. Officer Grant spun right. Mark flinched left. Linda jerked the gear shift. My heart slammed once hard, and Rears's ears twitched like flags in a gust. What happened next happened fast. The sheriff shouted a command. The SUV's engine roared. The gate swung wide. Ranger moved. And that's exactly where Chapter 1 ends, because the next beat is the first domino in a line that will knock over everything Linda built on paper and everything I thought I understood about my quiet street by the lake. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to know your city and state. The world snapped into fast motion. Sheriff Collins lunged toward Linda's driver door as her SUV jerked forward. The Tahoe's push bumper pivoted just enough to block her front wheel. Tires squealed. Officer Harris slid to the gate, one hand out, calm but firm. Ranger shifted half a step, shoulders square, body like a quiet wall between the man in the vest and the open yard. The neighbor kid's fallen bike lay at an angle, its bell chiming a nervous ding-ding in the wind. Hands on the wheel, ma'am. Now, the sheriff barked. Linda froze, mouth open, breath fogging the glass, for a heartbeat. It felt like the whole street forgot how to breathe. Mark, the guy in the HOA security vest, twitched like a rabbit. I was just measuring setbacks, he blurted, palms up. With wire cutters, Harris asked, voice flat. Mark swallowed. It's for vines, he tried. Don't, she said, and the word was a door closing. Ranger still, I said. He settled, but his eyes stayed bright. I kept my rifle pointed down, sling snug, fingers nowhere near the trigger. Nobody is getting hurt, I added, mostly for the kid peeking through the blinds across the street. Sheriff Collins opened Linda's door, reached in, and clicked the gear back to park. Step out, he said, slow. She did, stiff as a board. He guided her to the front of her SUV and had her place her hands on the hood. The metal hummed under the idling engine. Officer Grant, the sheriff called, grab that folder from the passenger seat. Don't flip pages yet, Grant did, holding it like evidence. Even from the porch, I could see the red stamp again. Lion. Okay, the sheriff said, voice calmer now. Everyone's safe. We're going to sort this like adults. Linda turned her head, face tight. Adults follow rules, she snapped. Adults also follow the law, the sheriff replied. He glanced at me. David, keep that dog and that rifle steady. You're fine where you are. Yes, sir. Then, like a rubber band finally relaxing, the tension let go. Neighbors took little steps onto their lawns. A screen door creaked. Somewhere down by the lake, a bullfrog croaked like a drum. The sheriff had Mark sit on the curb and asked him a few questions, slow and patient. Mark's answers came out like marbles. He worked part-time. He helped his cousin sometimes. He didn't know about property lines, and the wire cutters were for craft wire. Harris bagged the cutters anyway. Ma'am, the sheriff said to Linda, you and I are going to talk about these papers at the station. They look problematic. It's not fair, she said, voice wobbling now. He makes the neighborhood look like a farm, trucks, chickens, flags. People like him don't understand standards. The market is not the law, the sheriff said. He looked at me again. David, can you bring that deed and plat map to the property line? I want to show everyone where it ends. I stepped down slowly, lifted the folder from the little table by the swing, and walked to the edge of the yard. Ranger shadowed me, lean and quiet, then sat when I pointed to the porch. Guard, I said softly. He planted under the streetlight. The sheriff spread the plat map against the hood of his Tahoe. He traced with a blunt finger. Right here, he said loud enough for the small crowd. Birch Lane is the line. The Willow Lake Fosse covenants stop here. David's parcel is platted Lakeview number 2, which, read it with me, has no covenants and no association. He tapped the deed. This is recorded. You can't vote onto someone else's deed. Mr. Walker in his denim overalls nodded so hard his beard bounced. Told y'all, he said to nobody in particular. Linda pressed her lips together. Then we'll create a new association, she said quietly. We'll file it. You can create anything you like, the sheriff replied. It still won't attach to this property unless the owner signs. That's how consent works in this county and in this country. She looked small then. Not harmless, but smaller. I felt a tug in my chest. Not satisfaction, not yet. Something like sadness. People can get lost and forget how to come back. Ma'am, the sheriff added softer, community isn't made with fines. It's made with neighbors. He handed the folder to Grant. Beg it, chain of custody. Then he turned to me. We'll take statements tomorrow. David, lock your gates. Keep your cameras rolling. Call us if anyone comes back tonight. Yes, sir, I said. He looked at Ranger and let a tiny smile touch his eyes. Good dog. Best partner I ever had, I said. Ranger thumped his tail once against the step, almost like he agreed. The cruisers rolled away one by one. The golden green Tahoe followed. Neighbors drifted back inside. Porch lights winked off. The lake went back to being a black mirror with tiny shivers on it. I stood a minute on the porch, listening to the soft tick of cooling engines, to the crickets, to the way a quiet street exhales after a storm. Then I scratched Ranger under his gray chin. Easy, boy, I whispered. He leaned into my knee. All trust. That was the high, hot and loud, all sirens and sharp words. After the high, life shelved the drama for a minute. It always does. Morning came with pink light on the lake and the smell of cut grass. I brewed coffee and fried 2 eggs. Ranger got the corner of my toast because rules at my house allow for kindness that way. Around 9, I saw Mr. Walker hobble down with a pan in his hands. Brought cinnamon rolls, he said. My daughter made them. We figured last night wasn't neighborly. Let's do today right. Come up, I said, smiling. We'll eat on the porch. We did. Soon. Other folks wandered over. Rachel from 2 houses down with a jug of sweet tea. The teenage girl Lily with her younger brother and a bag of donut holes. Even Officer Harris off duty walking her tiny brown dachshund named Bean. We sat in lawn chairs in the porch swing. People said things like, we didn't know it was that bad, and she shouldn't have done that, and I'm sorry we didn't speak up earlier. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. Fear makes people quiet sometimes. I get that, but I believe in second chances, too. Lily looked at Ranger with big eyes. Is he really a retired canine? She asked. He is? I said. He worked bomb detection. He's braver than me. She reached out. Ranger sniffed her fingers and then leaned his head under her hand like he'd been waiting for that exact touch all morning. She smiled so wide I could see the little chip in her front tooth. We talked about small things and big things. We talked about how to help the widow on the corner keep her hedges in shape and how to fix the pothole that always nicks tires near the bend. Harris said she'd ask the city about it. Mr. Walker said he'd bring his push mower to the widow's yard that afternoon. I promised to fix the broken slats on the communal dock. Rachel mentioned a block cookout, hot dogs, potato salad, water balloons for the kids. We wrote times on a notepad. We made a plan. It felt like stitches pulling torn fabric together. Around noon, a small white sedan rolled slow past my house. A thin woman with gray hair sat in the passenger seat, cheeks hollow, eyes soft. She lifted a hand, a little wave. Linda's mom, Mr. Walker, murmured. Helen Browning, sweet lady, not well. The sedan stopped. The driver, maybe a niece, leaned out. Sorry to bother y'all, she said. We're just taking Mom for air. She wanted to see the lake. Would you like some tea? Rachel called, already standing, already kind. Please, the niece said, relieved. We helped Helen out. She walked with a cane and a tremble. When she sat on the porch, Ranger gently put his head on her knee and went still like he'd done this 1,000 times in hospitals. Helen's fingers, thin as bird bones, stroked his ears. She smiled, that soft smile older folks have when they find gentleness in a sharp world. My Linda gets so worked up, she said, voice thin. She means well. She likes things tidy. Sometimes tidy on the outside comes from messy on the inside, I said. Careful, she warned. We're trying to be neighbors anyway. Helen's eyes got wet. Thank you, she whispered. We talked about nothing and everything for 20 minutes. about the lake when it froze one winter in the 90s, about the old bait shop that used to sit where the playground is, about how the geese always find you if you stand still long enough. When they left, I walked them to the car. Helen squeezed my hand. "Thank you for your service," she said, glancing at Ranger's tag and my blue star. I squeezed back. "Thank you for yours," I said, "because mothering is a service, too." For a few hours, the street felt healed. I fixed the slats on the dock. Kids tossed rocks in the shallows to see whose splash was tallest. A dragonfly stitched the air like a silver needle. I let my shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. Then the letters started. 2 crisp white envelopes in my mailbox around 3 p.m., both stamped code enforcement. They listed violations that didn't make sense: illegal livestock, unpermitted fence height, prohibited signage, my tiny take a book, leave a book library apparently, and improper vehicle storage. Each had a fine amount printed in bold. Each had a due date. There was a phone number at the bottom, but it was a generic city line, not a direct officer. I called anyway. A tired man answered. "We got a stack of complaints from a neighborhood association," he said after I read him the list. "When we get that many, we have to mail forms, but if you're in the clear, just bring your deed and talk to Officer Dalton on Monday." I thanked him, hung up, and set the letters on my kitchen table. Ranger looked at them, then at me, like he could smell the ink of trouble. "Not today," I said. "They can't knock our joy off the shelf today." We held the line. I hammered a new hinge on the garden gate. Lily's little brother showed me his Lego police boat and explained in very serious terms how it chased Lego bad guys around Lego docks. Mr. Walker fell asleep in the porch swing with Bean the Dachshund curled on his lap, and Ranger sprawled like a lion at their feet. Soft things, gentle things, the kind that build a life. Evening came soft and gold. People drifted home for dinner. The street emptied. The last light on the lake turned honey and then faded to gray. I flipped on the porch light and checked the latch on the chicken run. The hens clucked, sleepy. Ranger did one last slow patrol of the fence and then came in to lie by the couch. I set my rifle in the safe by the door and locked it with a solid click. I made a simple supper, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and put a plate on the porch rail for Mr. Walker to take when he woke up. He didn't wake, so I covered it with foil. I washed dishes. I turned on a ball game low because the sound of baseball is the sound of safe summers. Peace stretched. At 9:17 p.m., the drone came. I heard it before I saw it. A high mosquito-like whine faint at first, then louder. Rares's ears pricked. He stood. We stepped onto the porch together. A small quadcopter floated above the streetlight, then drifted down until it hovered over my front walk, maybe 15 feet up. A bright white spotlight clicked on, washing the porch in LED glare. The drone had a speaker. It crackled, then blasted a metallic voice. "This property is out of compliance." The voice boomed. "Willow Lake Association has issued final notice. Enforcement action will commence." I shaded my eyes and stared. The drone dipped left, then right, as if looking around. Ranger gave a low, unhappy sound. "Not tonight," I said again, but the words tasted like tin. A minute later, engines rolled down Birch. Not police, not the sheriff. 3 white pickups with magnetic signs on the doors. Neighborhood compliance services, the kind you can order online. Men in orange vests jumped out. 2 carried bolt cutters. One had a sledgehammer slung over his shoulder. Another had a cable spool and a metal hook, the kind used to cut a power meter. I stepped forward. "You're on private property," I called, voice steady. "Leave." A man with a tablet lifted it like a shield. "We have authorization," he said. He held up a printout stamped again. "Lion. This property is subject to compliance seizure." "No, it is not," I said. "Back away from my meter." He grinned the tight grin of a person paid to ignore the obvious. "We can do this the hard way or the easy way." Ranger stood at the top step, a stone statue with eyes. The drone's spotlight burned the back of my neck. Somewhere far off, a dog barked and went quiet. I reached for my phone with one hand and dialed the sheriff. With the other, I pointed to the street. "You will step away," I said. "Right now." The man with the sledge laughed once and took a slow, deliberate step toward my porch. That's when the power on the sidewall snapped. One of them had already slipped to the meter, and the house coughed into darkness. The ball game died. The porch light went out. The drone's beam became the only sun on my street. Rear's growl deepened. A low thunder warning about to become storm. The man with the sledge set his feet on my bottom step. And that's where things get crazy, because the next seconds decide whether a fake paper can scare a whole neighborhood or whether neighbors stand up together in the dark and say, "No, not here." The darkness pressed close, the hum of the drone spotlight buzzing like an angry hornet over my porch. Rears's growl rolled low and steady, a warning thunder that made the hair on my arm stand tall. The men in orange vests stood frozen for a breath, bolt cutters and sledgehammer in hand, shadows stretched long across my lawn. Sheriff Collins answered my call on the first ring. "David," he said, voice sharp. "Sheriff," I said, steady but loud enough for the men to hear. "3 trucks, fake compliance crew. They've cut my power. They're on my porch right now." Before Collins could reply, one of the men barked, "Hang up now." He stepped closer, boots crunching on gravel. I didn't hang up. They're armed with tools, orange vests, white pickups. "Stay calm. Units are rolling," the sheriff said. "Do not engage unless you're threatened." The man with the sledgehammer grinned, teeth white in the glare. "Threatened?" he mocked. "We are the threat." He lifted the hammer and tapped it against my porch step. Thunk, thunk, like a drum beat. Ranger rose onto all fours, muscles tight, teeth flashing under the light. I shifted my weight, keeping my rifle angled down but ready. My voice came out firm. "That's far enough. One more step and you're trespassing on a decorated K-9's territory." The man laughed, but the sound cracked at the edges. His friend, the one with the cutters, hesitated, eyes darting to the dark street behind him. "Maybe we shouldn't shut up?" the hammerman snapped. And then from across the street, a door slammed. "Mister?" Walker shuffled out in his denim overalls, still holding the foil-covered plate of grilled cheese I'd left for him. "What in the blue blazes is going on?" he shouted, voice booming. The spotlight swung toward him. He squinted, free hand shading his eyes. "Put down those tools, or I'm calling the real cops," he barked. "You don't want none of this, old man," the hammer guy warned. But before he could finish, another porch light flicked on. Then another. Neighbors stepped out one by one, holding phones, recording, muttering. Lily, the teenager, stood with her little brother clutched to her side, eyes wide but brave. The hammerman cursed under his breath. "Back in the trucks," he hissed. But the drone speaker blared again, metallic and cold. "Enforcement action will continue until payment is made." That voice broke something in Ranger. He barked sharp, commanding, like he was back in uniform, and lunged down 2 steps. He didn't attack, just drew a line in the dirt, daring them to cross. The cutterman dropped his tool with a clatter. "Nope, I'm out," he muttered, backing away toward his truck. The hammer guy wasn't so smart. He raised the sledge high like he meant to smash my porch rail. My finger brushed closer to my rifle's safety. Still off, still pointed down, but ready. "Last warning," I shouted. The hammer started down, and that's when the golden green lights lit up the far end of Birch Lane. Siren whooping once like a hawk cry in the night. Sheriff Collins's Tahoe barreled into view, 2 cruisers right behind him. The hammerman froze mid-swing. The drone wavered, spotlight jerking as if startled, and every neighbor on the street cheered. Low, shaky, but real. The sheriff's voice boomed through his loudspeaker. "Drop the tools, hands on your head now." The hammer clanged against the pavement as the man let it go. But the drone, it zipped higher, spun once, and shot off into the night, spotlight vanishing like a false sun. Sheriff Collins skidded to a stop, door flying open, hand already on his sidearm. Officers spilled out, commanding precise. In less than 30 seconds, 2 men were face down on the asphalt, zip ties snapping tight. The third cutter man was already kneeling, hands up, babbling about not wanting trouble. Linda wasn't there this time, but her fingerprints were all over the scene. As the sheriff strode toward my porch, his jaw set. I felt my chest loosen for the first time since the lights went out. But I knew deep in my bones that this was only the middle of the storm, not the end. Because someone had sent those men. Someone had paid for that drone. And someone, maybe Linda, maybe bigger than her, believed they had the power to tear down good neighbors with fake rules. The sheriff raised his eyes to me, then to Ranger standing proud on the top step, chest heaving, eyes sharp. "You held the line," he said. "I'll always hold the line," I replied. The sheriff nodded once, then turned back toward the trucks, already barking orders. The sheriff's flashlight beam cut across the bed of the first white pickup. At first glance, it looked like a contractor's truck, toolboxes, tarps, and straps. But as Collins flipped back the tarp, a murmur ran through the small crowd of neighbors that had gathered near the sidewalk. In the bed lay a stack of official-looking signs. Notice of violation, Willow Lake HOA, in bold black letters stamped with a fake seal that looked frighteningly close to the county's. Next to them sat rolls of bright orange stickers, just like the one that had been slapped on my mailbox. And at the bottom of the pile, there were folders, dozens of them, each with a property address written neatly in black marker. The sheriff lifted one, flipped it open, and held it up so his deputies could see. Inside were fake lien papers, pre-filled with names and dollar amounts ready to be delivered. Mine was sitting right on top. "Counterfeit legal documents," Collins muttered, jaw tight. "That's a felony," one of the neighbors gasped. Lily, the teenager, pulled her little brother closer, whispering that it was okay. But even she looked shaken. The second truck was worse. When they cracked the back door, the beam landed on a crate filled with padlocks, bolt cutters, and tow straps, tools for seizing property. Another crate held cameras like the drone we just seen, packed in foam with batteries and speakers. "These people weren't here to find anyone," Officer Harris said grimly. "They were here to intimidate." The sheriff turned to the men zip-tied on the pavement. "Who hired you?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of stone. The hammermen sneered. "We don't answer to you. Talk to our client." The cutter man, still pale, broke first. "It was Linda," he blurted. "She paid us. Said it was community enforcement. Said she had the legal right." His words tumbled out fast, desperate. "I didn't know it was fake. I swear. She gave us the papers. She said the sheriff was dragging his feet." "Shut up, Mark," the hammerman barked, but it was too late. The sheriff's face didn't change, but his eyes hardened. He turned back to his deputies. "Bag everything. Photograph all of it. Impound the vehicles." Then he looked at me. "David, I'm not going to lie. This goes deeper than one angry neighbor. If she's printing this much, she's been trying to enforce it on more than just you." Around us, neighbors shifted uncomfortably. Murmurs rose. One older man near the corner muttered that he'd been paying fees for years, afraid his house would get taken if he didn't. Another woman admitted she'd gotten letters too, but thought they were real. The truth was spilling out like water through cracks in a dam. I stepped forward, voice steady. "Listen, everyone, you've been lied to. Real community doesn't come with threats and fake liens. It comes from neighbors helping neighbors." I gestured toward the folded table where just that morning we'd shared cinnamon rolls and tea. "That's what this street is. That's what we build, not this garbage." A quiet amen rose from Mr. Walker, standing solid as an oak in his overalls. The sheriff nodded once, then gestured to the deputies to start clearing the scene. But just as people began to breathe again, thinking the danger was over, one of the officers opened the third truck and froze. "Sheriff," he called, voice sharp. We all turned. Inside that truck, under another tarp, lay rows of black folders stamped with a gold logo. "Willow Lake Master Development Board." These weren't fake HOA files. They looked corporate, real, legal, and there were a lot of them. The sheriff climbed up, flipped one open, and swore under his breath. "Well, I'll be." "What is it?" I asked. He hopped down, folder in hand. "These aren't just Linda's fantasies. This is a development group, an actual LLC, planning to expand HOA control past Birch Lane. It lists properties, estimated values, projected dues. Your house, David, is on the list with a note that says, 'Hold out. Forced compliance likely.'" My stomach turned to stone. Neighbors started shouting at once. "They can't do that. We never agreed. That's theft." The sheriff held up his hand. "Calm down. This is evidence now. But make no mistake, they were planning something big." He shot a look down the street where Linda's house sat dark. "And I think we know who their eager foot soldier is." As deputies packed the folders into evidence bags, I noticed Rers's ears twitch. He turned his head toward the lake, nose lifted, body tense. I frowned. "What is it, boy?" Then I heard it too. The faint putter of a motorboat coming closer in the dark. Its light off, unmarked, moving toward the dock. The sheriff heard it too. He squinted into the black water. That's not normal. "Harris, Keeter radio. Dispatch, we've got movement on the lake. Possible accomplices." The motor sputtered, then cut out, leaving only the sound of water slapping against wood. Something or someone was out there, hidden in the dark. The sheriff's hand hovered near his holster. Ranger stood, muscles tight, a low growl humming in his chest. Whatever was happening on land was only half the fight. Something was waiting out on that black water. The lake was still, black as oil. The moon caught in its ripples like a cracked coin. Ranger stood at the porch edge, body tight, growl steady, nose pointed toward the dock. The faint sound of boots on wet wood carried through the night. Slow, deliberate. Spotlight on the dock. Sheriff Collins barked. One of his deputies swung a flashlight beam across the water. The light landed on two figures crouched low in a flat-bottomed boat. Both wore black hoodies. One had a long case across his lap, the kind used for surveying gear or rifles. "Sheriff," Harris called, hand on her holster. "Hands where I can see them," Collins shouted. The taller figure in the boat raised his hand slowly, but the other kept fumbling with something by the motor. The boat rocked. Ranger barked sharp and loud, chest shaking with the sound. Neighbors huddled on their porches, whispering, phones up recording. I heard Lily whisper to her little brother, "Stay behind me." "Step onto the dock," Collins commanded, voice hard. The tall man obeyed, movement stiff, hands still up. He wore black gloves. The flashlight beam caught the glint of something clipped to his belt. Bolt cutters again. He stepped forward, shoes squatching on the old wood. But the second man, the one bent over the motor, suddenly yanked the cord. The engine roared back to life. He shoved the boat off hard and gunned it toward the far side of the lake. "Stop that boat!" Collins roared. The deputy nearest the dock sprinted forward, but it was too late. The motorboat tore across the water, leaving a foaming wake. The man on board twisted in his seat, shouting something we couldn't hear, and then tossed a black duffel bag overboard. It splashed and sank fast, swallowed by the dark lake. "LZ, mark that drop point," Collins ordered. She tapped it into her phone, eyes tracking the ripples. The man left on the dock stayed frozen under the flashlight, hands still high. "Don't shoot," he cried. His voice cracked young and shaky. "I was just told to deliver stuff, that's all." "By who?" Collins barked. "Linda," he blurted. "She said she needed supplies for the association, said it was all legal." The neighbors groaned angry now. Even Mr. Walker cursed under his breath. Collins nodded to his deputy. "Cuff him." As they led the young man off the dock, I stepped closer to the sheriff. "That duffel bag, what do you think was in it?" The sheriff's eyes were sharp, troubled. Could be more fake documents, could be equipment, could be something worse. "Either way, we'll drag the lake in the morning." Ranger wed uneasy, his gaze still on the water. I rubbed his back, but even my hand felt shaky. The sheriff lowered his voice. "David, this isn't just Linda playing HOA president anymore. Someone's feeding her. Someone with money. No neighborhood busybody buys drones and boats and pays men to cut power lines. This is organized." I nodded slowly. My chest was tight. "Then it's bigger than Birch Lane." "Yes," Collins said. "And it means we're not done yet." We all walked back toward the street. The arrested men were loaded into cruisers, evidence bags stacked up on the Tahoe's hood. The sheriff made one last pass, shaking hands with neighbors, telling them to lock their doors and leave porch lights on. Folks nodded, still buzzing with shock, but grateful for his steadiness. When the cruisers pulled away and the street settled into uneasy quiet again, Mr. Walker shuffled over to me. He put a gnarled hand on my shoulder. "Son," he said, "you didn't ask for this fight, but maybe you're the one meant to stand in it." I swallowed hard. Ranger pressed against my leg, warm and steady. "Maybe," I said. I thought that was the end of the night, but trouble doesn't wait for sleep. At 2:13 a.m., Ranger barked again, this time from the back door. His hackles rose, his bark sharp and furious. I grabbed the flashlight and hurried out. In the beam, I saw it. My chicken coop door wide open, hens scattering in panic, feathers littering the ground, and painted across the side of the coop in dripping red spray paint were the words, "Join or lose." The paint was fresh, still wet. Whoever had done it was close. Ranger snarled, nose to the ground, pulling me toward the tree line. The night was alive with crickets, but beneath that I heard footsteps, fast, retreating into the dark woods. I flicked off the safety on instinct. My heart hammered. Ranger lunged toward the tree line, nose down, muscles coiled like a spring. His growl rumbled so deep it vibrated the ground beneath my boots. The fresh spray paint on the chicken coop still glistened under my flashlight beam. Those words screaming louder than any threat spoken face to face. Join or lose. I clipped Ranger's lead to his harness. Rifle slung tight, and we pushed into the woods. Twig snapped ahead of us. Quick stumbling footsteps, someone trying to outrun their own fear. "Stop!" I shouted into the dark. "You're trespassing on private property. Sheriff's on his way." No answer, just the sound of branches whipping back, leaves crunching under panicked feet. Ranger pulled hard, leading me down the narrow deer path that cut behind the lake. My beam of light caught flashes of movement, a black hoodie, the glint of something metallic in a hand. Bolt cutters again. "Drop it!" I yelled. The figure sprinted harder. We broke through a clearing where the moonlight spilled silver over the ground. Ranger surged forward, barking sharp and furious, forcing the man to stumble. He turned his head, face pale in the light, eyes wide with fear. "Mark, the same HOA security guy from before." "You again?" I muttered, breath harsh. He tripped over a root, fell hard, and scrambled to his knees, hands raised. "Don't shoot. I was just doing what she said. Linda, she said if I didn't help, she'd ruin me. Call my boss, get me fired, tell people lies." His voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I kept my rifle angled down but steady. Ranger stood over him, lips curled, daring him to move. "Who gave her the money for all this?" I demanded. Mark shook his head fast. "I don't know. She just kept saying she had backing, that it was bigger than just Willow Lake. Said if we pushed hard enough, everybody would fold. Said it was about control." "Names?" I snapped. "I don't know names. I swear she only ever mentioned the board. That's all." Behind us, the crunch of tires on gravel carried through the night. Sheriff Collins's Tahoe headlights cut through the trees like a sunrise. Relief hit me hard. Collins climbed out, hand on his belt. "David, what have we got?" I shoved my chin toward Mark. Caught him spray painting my coupe. He says Linda forced him. Claims there's a bigger board behind this. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Figures." He signaled to Harris, who had followed in a cruiser. "Cuff him. We'll let him explain it in the interrogation room." Harris pulled Mark to his feet. Ranger never broke eye contact until the cuffs clicked. Back at my porch, Collins studied the dripping red paint, his jaw tight. "Escalation," he muttered. "They're not satisfied with fake fines anymore. Now it's vandalism, intimidation. Next step could be worse." "I'm not folding," I said. My voice came out harder than I expected. "This is my land, my house, my community." Collins clapped a hand on my shoulder. "And you've got us, David. But you need to be ready. If there's a board behind Linda, they won't stop at chickens. They'll come for more." Neighbors started trickling out again in robes and slippers, flashlights in hand, whispering as they saw the red paint. Fear was spreading like wildfire, and I hated it. Fear is how people like Linda win. So I raised my voice. "Listen, everyone. They want us scared. They want us quiet. But this street is stronger than lies tomorrow. We'll clean this up together. We'll fix the coop. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. They can't bully all of us." Mr. Walker nodded firmly. "That's right. They want war. They picked the wrong street." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. People weren't whispering anymore. They were angry. And anger can be the seed of courage when planted in the right soil. By 3 a.m., the cruisers rolled away with Mark in the back seat. The sheriff promised patrols would circle every hour till dawn. Still, when I lay down, I didn't sleep. Ranger didn't either. He sat at the window, eyes glowing in the faint light, watching, guarding. When morning came, Birch Lane was alive with movement. Neighbors grabbed buckets, brushes, and soap. Kids carried rags. Lily showed up with her brother and a spray bottle of vinegar. Even Rachel brought fresh biscuits in a basket. Together, we scrubbed the hateful words from my coupe until nothing remained but faint pink streaks that would fade in time. It wasn't just cleaning paint. It was cleaning fear. But peace never lasts long in a fight like this. Around noon, as we shared biscuits and sweet tea, a white envelope appeared taped to my front door. No one saw who left it. No car slowed. It was just there. I pulled it free, opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed in bold black. "This is your final warning. You will join or you will lose everything." At the bottom was no signature, no seal, just 3 words typed in all caps. By order of the board, the street fell silent as I read it aloud. Ranger growled low, eyes fixed on the tree line again. The envelope shook in my hand as I read those words again. By order of the board. They weren't bluffing anymore. This wasn't just Linda harassing me. It was something bigger, darker, and organized. Neighbors shifted nervously. Lily whispered to her brother, "It's like a movie." Mr. Walker leaned heavy on his cane, jaw clenched. Rachel muttered, What kind of people threaten families like this? Ranger let out a short bark, pacing along the porch like he could smell the danger in the ink. I took a deep breath. They think fear will drive us apart, I said loud enough for everyone to hear. But fear won't win here. We stick together. We call this out. We fight it the right way. Sheriff Collins arrived not long after, pulling up in his Tahoe. His boots hit the gravel hard as he walked up, eyes sharp. I handed him the letter. He read it once, then again, his lips pressed into a tight line. "This is escalation," he said. "They're getting bold. The board isn't just some name Linda invented. We've been digging since last night. Willow Lake Master Development Board is a registered LLC, out-of-town investors. They've been funding her, hoping she'd scare everyone into folding. If she pulled it off here, they'd expand across the county." The neighbors gasped. Someone muttered, "So we were test dummies." "That's right," Collins said grimly. "And now that their plan's failing, they're going to push harder." I stepped forward. Then we pushed back. But legally, no vigilante justice. We shine light on them. The sheriff nodded. "That's the right attitude. But I'm warning you, these people have money, lawyers, and muscle. They'll try to break you before this is over." The crowd thinned after a while, folks heading back to their homes with worried faces in them. They weren't folding. They were angry now, and anger, when shared, becomes resolve. That evening, I repaired the coop door, replaced the broken latch, and spread fresh hay. Ranger stayed close, watchful. The sun set over the lake, painting the water orange and gold. For a moment, it almost felt normal almost. At 8:47 p.m., just as the porch lights blinked on up and down the street, the rumble of engines shattered the quiet. Not one engine, several. I stepped onto my porch with Ranger at my side, rifle slung, safety on. Headlights glared through the trees. 3 black SUVs rolled slowly down Birch Lane. Not county vehicles, not police. These were tinted, polished corporate. The SUVs stopped in front of my house. Doors opened in unison. 4 men stepped out, all in dark suits, crisp and clean, like they'd walked out of a courtroom and into my yard. They weren't locals. Their shoes alone probably cost more than my truck. The lead man adjusted his tie, calm as if he were greeting a client. "Mr. Carter?" he said smoothly. His voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "That's me," I said. "We represent the Willow Lake Master Development Board," he continued. "This neighborhood is under new management. Compliance is not optional. You will sign the papers, or the consequences will escalate beyond your comfort." Behind me, I heard screen doors creak open. Neighbors were coming out, phones recording. Mr. Walker muttered, "Snake oil salesmen in fancy suits." Lily whispered, "They look like FBI." Ranger growled deep and steady. The men glanced at him, but didn't flinch. The leader even smirked. "That dog may scare your neighbors, but it doesn't scare us." I shifted my stance. "You've trespassed on private property. You've vandalized. You've sent threats. The sheriff has all your evidence. You need to leave." The man in the tie stepped closer, smiling like a wolf. "Evidence can vanish. Neighbors can be bought. Houses can burn." His voice dropped low. "Don't test us." That was the spark. Neighbors stepped out fully now. Some holding phones, others gripping bats or garden tools. Rachel raised her voice. "We're not scared of you. This is our street." The suited men looked around, their smirks slipping as they realized half the block was watching, recording, standing together. But instead of backing down, the lead man chuckled darkly. He reached into his jacket, not for a weapon, but for a thick envelope. He tossed it onto my porch. "Final notice," he said. "You have 48 hours. Then just like that, they turned, climbed back into their SUVs, and rolled away slow like they owned the road. Silence hung heavy after the engines faded. Neighbors looked at me, scared but firm. Lily asked, "What's in the envelope?" I picked it up, tore it open. Inside were neatly typed contracts, binding agreements with my name already filled in, and stapled to the top a single photograph. Not of me, not of Ranger, of my sister's house 3 towns over. The message was clear. This fight had just left Birch Lane. Ranger growled again, louder this time, as if he understood what that photo meant. The photograph trembled in my hand. My sister's house, white porch, flower bed she'd planted with her 2 little kids, sat printed in glossy black and white. Someone had been close enough to take the picture from the sidewalk. Too close. The neighbors leaned in, faces pale in the porch light. Rachel whispered, "That's not just intimidation. That's a threat." Mr. Walker gripped his cane so tight his knuckles whitened. "They're playing dirty now, son." Ranger pressed against my leg, growling low, eyes fixed on the road where the SUVs had disappeared. He could feel it. Danger wasn't just circling my coupe anymore. It was reaching for blood. I called my sister immediately. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful until she heard mine. "Emily, listen carefully," I said. "Have you seen anyone strange near the house? Any black SUVs?" She went quiet for a beat. "Actually, yes. Yesterday, a man in a suit parked across the street said he was a surveyor, asked questions about zoning." Her voice trembled. "Why, David? What's going on? Lock your doors. Don't let the kids play outside. I'll explain later, but you're in danger because of me." Her voice hardened. "She's tough like that. If it's because of you, then it's worth standing firm. We won't scare easy." I promised to call the sheriff to put a unit near her house. When I hung up, Sheriff Collins was already pulling back onto Birch Lane, lights flashing. I showed him the photograph, his jaw locked tight. "They're stepping over lines they can't come back from," he said. "This is racketeering, intimidation, maybe even conspiracy, but it also means you need protection because they're not just bluffing anymore." Harris muttered. "We should move him and his dog into protective housing." I shook my head. "I'm not running. This is my home. If I leave, they win." The sheriff studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but you're not fighting alone. We'll set up patrols." "And David," he lowered his voice, "this ends with arrests, but it might get ugly before then." That night, no one on Birch Lane slept. Porch lights burned bright like a string of lanterns warding off the dark. Neighbors patrolled in pairs, walking with flashlights and bats. Ranger paced the fence nose high, every sense alive. It felt like a siege. At 3:02 a.m., it began again. A car alarm blared at the far end of the street. Tires screeched. By the time I sprinted out with Ranger at my side, a neighbor's sedan had been shoved halfway across the yard. Its windshield shattered. Spray paint across the hood read, "Time's up." Neighbors gathered in robes, shouting, scared. Lily clung to her brother, eyes wide. The sheriff's Tahoe appeared minutes later. He looked at the car, then at me. "They're sending messages, testing how far they can push before someone breaks." I stared at the words dripping across the hood, chest tight. "They want us to fold, and we're not going to," Collins said firmly. We boarded the night together. Neighbors huddled, deputies circling, Ranger watching the tree line. By dawn, the street looked exhausted but unbroken. That morning, Collins called a meeting in my yard. He stood on my porch, badge glinting in the new sun, and spoke loud enough for every porch on Birch Lane to hear. "Folks, this is bigger than one street. These people want to build fear, then build profit on that fear. They'll push until you sign or run. But if you stay strong, if you stay together, we can take them down legally. It's not just about David, it's about all of you." The crowd murmured, heads nodding. Mr. Walker raised his cane like a staff. "We're with you, Sheriff," Rachel called out. "Let's show them they picked the wrong town." It was the first time I'd seen hope in days, but hope has a way of drawing fire. Because just as Collins finished speaking, a black drone buzzed low over the street. This one wasn't carrying a spotlight. It carried a small metal canister. The drone swooped, dropped it, and zipped away before anyone could react. The canister clattered onto the asphalt, rolled once, and hissed. A sharp, acrid smoke spewed out, filling the street with a choking cloud. Kids screamed. Neighbors coughed. "Get back! Get inside!" Collins roared, covering his mouth. I yanked Lily and her brother toward my porch. Ranger barked furiously at the smoke, teeth bared, hackles raised. The sheriff's deputies rushed to kick the canister into the ditch, but the damage was done. The air stank, eyes burned, throats scratched raw. "Gas," Harris coughed. "Some kind of irritant. They're escalating hard." I pulled Ranger close, anger boiling hot. They weren't just threatening anymore. They were attacking. The acrid smoke drifted away with the wind, but its sting lingered in our throats. Neighbors stood on their porches coughing, eyes red, kids crying. Birch Lane didn't look like a quiet street anymore. It looked like a war zone. Sheriff Collins slammed the Tahoe door shut, face dark with fury. "They just crossed into domestic terrorism," he growled. "Dropping gas on a residential street. That's not HOA bullying anymore. That's an attack." Harris, still wiping tears from her eyes, held up the dented canister with gloves. "Industrial irritant. Illegal for civilians to deploy." "Whoever's funding this has serious connections," neighbors muttered angrily. Fear had shifted into rage. Rachel shouted, "They could have hurt our kids." Lily clutched her little brother, glaring at the sky where the drone had fled. I stood on my porch with Ranger at my side, his body stiff, his growl steady, nose still working the wind. He wanted to chase, but he also knew, like I did, that the fight had changed. I raised my voice. They thought this would break us, but if anything, they just proved how desperate they are. We don't run. We don't fold. We protect each other. Mr. Walker lifted his cane high like a flag. We stand together. The crowd erupted in agreement. Phones went up. Videos of the smoke attack spread across Facebook and Twitter. Within minutes, people typed furiously, tagging news outlets and state officials. The story of Birch Lane versus the board was leaving our street, but the board wasn't finished. At 11:30 a.m., while folks were still outside cleaning up, a black SUV rolled slow past the end of the lane. No plates, tinted windows. It didn't stop. It just crawled along watching. "Sheriff," I called, nodding toward it. Collins already had his radio up. "Dispatch, get me traffic units on the north and south entrances. I want that SUV boxed in." The vehicle sped up suddenly, tires squealing, and vanished down the hill. Collins cursed under his breath. "They're probing, testing how fast we respond." By afternoon, things seemed calmer. Kids played again, though under watchful eyes. Rachel brought sweet tea. We patched the broken window of the vandalized sedan. For a moment, Birch Lane looked normal again. But at dusk, everything changed. The power went out. Not just my house, every house on Birch Lane. Street lights flickered once, then darkness swallowed the block. Gasps rippled through the neighborhood. Phones lit up like fireflies as people tried to call out. I tested my porch light switch. Nothing. "They cut the grid," Harris muttered, scanning the shadows. Planned hit. In the silence, a generator rumbled to life, coming from Linda's house at the far end of the street. Her windows glowed warm while the rest of us stood in dark. Rachel hissed, "She's working with them." I clenched my jaw. She's more than working with them. She's their local enforcer. Just then, Uryar's ears shot up. He barked twice, sharp, pointing toward the lake. Flashlights swung. Out on the dock, lanterns flickered to life. Silhouettes moved, men unloading crates from a boat, stacking them like supplies for a siege. "What in God's name?" Collins whispered. Harris zoomed her phone camera. "Those aren't tools," she said, voice tight. "Those are more drones. At least half a dozen." A chill cut through me. They weren't just scaring us anymore. They were preparing for an all-out campaign. The sheriff barked orders into his radio. Deputies scrambled. Neighbors stood closer together, fear mixing with determination. Lily whispered to me, "They're coming, aren't they?" I looked at her, then at the dark lake where shadows moved like chess pieces. Ranger growled again, steady and low. "Yes," I said, "they're coming." The lanterns on the dock glowed like eyes in the dark. And then the drones rose. 6 of them, black and buzzing, their red lights blinking as they lifted into the night sky. They spread out over Birch Lane, hovering above houses like vultures, waiting for something to die. Neighbors screamed. Kids ducked under porch railings. Ranger barked so hard his chest shook, teeth flashing white in the dim glow. One drone speaker crackled to life. Willow Lake Board orders final compliance. Submit or be removed. Another dropped a paper from the sky. It fluttered down, landing in Rachel's yard. Another fake lien notice, bold and smug. Sheriff Collins stood in the middle of the street, hands on his hips, voice booming louder than the machines. "You're trespassing. You're endangering children. And you're finished. Every second you stay in the sky is another felony." The drones didn't budge. One swooped lower, its camera whirring as it filmed the block. Another tilted sideways, aiming its nozzle like it might release more gas. I felt the weight of the rifle across my chest. My finger hovered near the safety, but I held back. Not yet. Not unless it came to life or death. Then Ranger leapt off the porch, eyes locked on the lowest drone. His bark was a thunderclap. The machine dipped, startled by the sudden movement, and for a moment it wobbled in the air. Neighbors cheered. The sheriff barked into his radio. "Signal jammer now." From the back of his Tahoe, a deputy rolled out a black case, popped it open, and flipped a switch. A high-pitched hum filled the air. One by one, the drones jerked, spun, and dropped like flies into the grass, motors whining as they powered down. The crowd erupted in cheers. Lily threw her arms around her brother. Rachel clapped. Mr. Walker raised his cane high and hollered, "That's how you swat a bug." But the celebration lasted only seconds. From the far end of the street, Linda's generator-powered house blazed with light. Her door flew open, and she stormed out, phone in hand, screaming into the night. "You think this is over? The board owns this town. You can't stop them." Sheriff Collins strode toward her, badge gleaming in his flashlight beam. "Linda Browning, you're under arrest for conspiracy, harassment, fraud, and endangerment," she shrieked, backing toward her porch. "You can't arrest me. They promised me power. They said I'd run this community." The sheriff didn't flinch. "And now you're going to run a cell block." Harris cuffed her as neighbors clapped and shouted. For the first time, Birch Lane stood tall, united in victory. But the sheriff wasn't smiling. He held up one of the folders we'd pulled from the black trucks. "This fight isn't finished," he warned. "The board isn't just Linda. They're bigger, richer, and meaner than anything we've seen. But tonight, you proved they can be stopped." I looked around at the faces of my neighbors, tired, scared, but glowing with pride. They weren't just homeowners anymore. They were a community, a family. I put my arm around Rears's neck, his fur warm and steady under my hand. "They'll come again?" I said quietly. "Yes," Collins replied. "But now the whole county will be watching, and so will the law." The morning sun rose over Birch Lane hours later, pouring golden light over porches and picket fences. The words on my coupe were gone, scrubbed clean by neighbors' hands. The broken window was patched. Kids played again. Laughter echoing through the air. Linda's house sat dark now, her SUV impounded, her windows shut. She was gone. And though the board's shadow still stretched beyond our lake, here on the street we had won. Because money can build walls and buy drones, but it can't outlast neighbors who refuse to be broken. And that, in the end, was Birch Lane's true covenant. Not contracts, not lies, but kindness, courage, and the simple strength of standing together. Ranger wagged his tail as the sun climbed higher. I scratched his ears and smiled. "Good boy," I whispered. We held the line. The fight was over, at least for now. Before we close this story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Drop your city and state.